All right, thanks for coming. So fifth React Native Munich meetup. So it's kind of a special meetup. We have a guest from Cologne, Thomas as well, Thomas Kuller, and he's our partner in Cologne from React Native Cologne. So, and also thanks to Simon Brugger from Space Lab for providing the room and the food. And yeah, thanks for having us. And if you're ready, let's start. So Space Lab is where we are now. So this is a tech accelerator for Media Saturn, MediaMarkt and Saturn. And if you're interested, just approach Simon. And maybe you want to present briefly.
Yeah. Hello, everybody. Nice to meet you. A warm welcome also from my side. Please have as much beer as you can. I don't want to take it home, and also have a lot of pizza. If you are interested in this Space Lab and Media Saturn in general, just come to me, ask me, text me, whatever you want. I'm the whole evening available, and and enjoy the meetup, and have drinks and snacks. Welcome.
Okay, so Munich just crossed 250 members, so very nice. I didn't expect this. Cologne is catching up, 115 so far, and we had 5 meetups. This is the 5th in Munich, counting the 2 workshops, the smaller ones. And in Cologne, we just had last Friday the 2nd meetup. And Thomas Koller is from Silver Tours, Billiger Mietwagen, you may know, and company of Pro7 Sat.1, and they are sponsoring Cologne and also the partnership that we can visit each other. So Thomas is now organizing the group I founded in Cologne. They're taking it over. So they have a local organizer there that we can somehow share talks, speakers, collaborate on the workshop. And with 2 people, it's just not double the work to have 2 meetups, but it's maybe half the work because we can also share work. Preparing a presentation is a lot of work, like getting speakers, getting your code, live coding done. And so it's all better this way, and it's a lot more fun. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me. And we're also looking for a 3rd or 4th volunteer, so feel free to join us.
Yeah, so whoever wants to contribute is very welcome. I know it's a lot of work, and most people are busy, but it helps. And so thanks to Nacho, who actually contributed, and will give a talk today on Redux. So the first talk, and it's about what Redux is, how you can use it in React Native, just the basics to get you going, and later on we will get to more advanced topics. Also, we want to make this a big community, and I think one thing is it makes sense to somehow collaborate with the React group. So I will see if we can, for example, if there's a topic that interests both parties, like the React group and the React Native group, that we can share, have a joint meetup. This would make a lot of sense, but because currently we're having some kind of parallel things like meetups from React Native there, and topics like Redux that would also interest the other group. So let's see if we can do this. If you're interested to make this work, or for example, to give a talk about GraphQL, Redux, stuff that's also interesting for the React community, feel free to contribute, and also to join us in Slack. So we can exchange, for example, the organization, the workshop. If you have some questions, some technical problems, very welcome to join there. And if you like React Native or React and you don't want to give a big talk, you can also just give a 5-minute talk. Just present something you just learned. Maybe I just went through this tutorial and I can briefly summarize it in 5 minutes. This will also be a nice contribution, or to contribute to the app project, to help other people get started installing. This is all nice. So let's see. All right, so so for those that haven't been here before, the question always is how native is React Native? You've seen Cordova, and the problem there really is maybe summarized in this one screenshot. So for example, if you're integrating a map view in your Cordova app, you will get a web map view. And this really doesn't feel native. So what you do instead is you use native components in React Native. It's not rendering HTML, but it's using iOS, for example, Apple Maps here, or on Android, it uses the native elements that are provided there. So this is the app project that we just started. It's just for demonstrating how React Native works. It's a very small project that we will gradually, incrementally build with you if you're interested. The right side just shows the smallest possible React Native app, just saying hello world, that you can see if you have done React before, you already almost know React Native. If you haven't done React before, it's also not so difficult. It's really easy to learn, a lot easier than, for example, Android development native. All right, so just a quick summary. React Native, I would summarize as JavaScript, modern JavaScript ES6 with native components, no HTML. And instead of writing 3 apps like iOS, Android, and the web, you could do one app in React Native. You might be surprised to see web there. I will come to that later. And yeah, it's built on top of React, just skipping the HTML part, so to say. And it's not a web view like Cordova. It's no HTML. JavaScript is not being transpiled or something to a native language, but it's somehow like a remote control. JavaScript runs in your application, and it just over the bridge calls some native functions. Says, for example, render me this view in this background color and this styling, and the native side will take care of it. This is also this is nice because you can use all the native components, and you're not locked in that you have some common lowest denominator, but you can really take advantage of all the features that are on each platform. And if something is not wrapped or exposed to React Native yet, it's not so difficult to do it yourself, as some have already seen. And it's native in look and feel, and except for controlling it from JavaScript, it really is also native code that's being run. It's quick to learn. You don't write the same code for everything, but you just learn once in JavaScript and React how to program, and then you can take advantages of the platform differences instead of just evening everything out. It's quicker to develop. You don't need to compile. You can just, if you're just changing JavaScript code, you can hot reload, just like saving a Word document. It's immediately updated, and it's still 0 point something. It's open source and it's from Facebook, and it's already silently mixed into popular production apps. It's not so many, but for example, the Facebook app actually got some small unknown parts that are already in React Native, and they're trying it on several companies like SoundCloud, Spotify, Airbnb, Bayerischer Rundfunk, Wix. They all have in the pipeline React Native projects, and they are mixing it into your app that you're actually using without noticing, or they are planning to release something. And also there's IDE support from WebStorm, from Visual Studio Code, Atom. You need Xcode or Android Studio usually running, so the native tools you also need, and except for if you're using Exponent, which allows you to just take advantage of a kind of prepackaged native app, and you can just focus on the JavaScript part. But don't worry about this if that confuses you. So hot code push. So this is an exception on iOS. The only code you can change without the App Store is JavaScript code. You shouldn't change too much, and there's actually some discussion about it, but essentially there's information on the web that this is allowed as long as you're not changing the nature of your app. So you can replace the JavaScript code in your app without going through the App Store almost instantly. So if this is a good or bad thing, or if you want to try it, or if not, that's up to you. All right, so this night is about Redux. So Redux isn't really a React Native topic, but since Redux is React, also Redux will be used in React Native. It's not exclusive to React Native, but it makes sense as a lot of you haven't heard of Redux before to actually present it. So this is what Nacho and Thomas will do. I will just briefly summarize. The right side, what you see here is the DOM, so to say. DOM is hierarchical. So this is, for example, the top view and maybe some button and a part of a button, something like this. And what Redux is doing, because all that React or React Native is doing, is the presentation, right? The view layer. And Redux is taking care of managing your data. You could also do it natively here in each component, but at some point it just becomes exhaustive, it becomes difficult, error-prone. For example, if you're synchronizing with a client in the server, you want to cache your data somewhere, or you want to share it between different components, this is where Redux comes in. So essentially you have actions, you have a big JSON object, you're sending actions to something that interprets them and changes this object. More details, not from me. All right. So you will see this animation later. All right, so what I would also like to suggest, so now we're having a Redux meetup. If you're interested to see how Redux works in React Native, we will have a Redux coding night. I'm no longer calling it workshop, but because this is not really a course. We cannot provide all the details, come from each and to every person, help him installing everything. You have to contribute yourself. You have to. We can get you started. We can help you, but at some point you have to learn on your own, and it's no help for you if somebody does it for you, because at some point you just have to do it. But what we can do is we can provide a kind of practice room where you can do this, where you can see how others do it, learn something from them, train yourself, your skills, and essentially this is what we'll do next time. We'll integrate Redux in the app. So currently what you're seeing is just some placeholder just to show I can do I can do native maps, I can do a list view, a native list view, but later on what this app really is intending to do is to present or to provide a platform where you can actually share something like news. This is some cool thing about React or GraphQL or Redux or React Native or React VR. Anything you want, you can share news there. You can tag them with certain semantic tags that people can actually filter and say, I'm interested in this topic, but this I don't care about. So this app should allow React developers in general, or even JavaScript. I don't want to make it too confined. So whoever likes something about JavaScript can post it there. Could also be a solution, like something, I have a problem here, what's the solution? Or I solved this problem, I want to share it with someone else. I have a project, I'm looking for a project. This could all be in this app if you make it possible. Help us to contribute. So next time we'll just take this app and actually take the part where we actually implement the knowledge base. So currently we just have this event list, is a kind of placeholder that's now being transformed to use Redux. We will show it tonight, and the next one will be about applying Redux to the knowledge base. All right, so what's more? Something very interesting is React Native Web. You may think, well, it's crap or it's nice. There may be different opinions, but this is actually from Twitter, from the lead engineer of Twitter. He's developing it. So he's saying, we have a problem, like we want to share React components, libraries, APIs between teams, and we need a common way to handle style, animation, touch, viewport, adaptation. And this is hard to do with low-level HTML components. So actually their suggestion, why not use React Native? Sounds a bit crazy at first, but not so crazy when you think about it. To use React Native as a higher level of rendering. So you don't have to worry about the browser differences or something each time, but you have a more higher level. And actually what this allows us to do, and this could be our second coding night, and this is what I've done, is you see on the left side the list view from the React Native app, like you currently have it. And without almost changing anything, I made it a website. This is running in Google Chrome. So rendering with HTML, rendering with native components. It's almost the same. Of course, it's a bit different because it's not rendering on the same engine. But this will be our second workshop to come. Both are like intermediate level. As I said, beginners are welcome to join, to listen, to learn, but we need to somehow also get past the installation process, or like how do I render a component. It would be nice if you already know what React is and how you render a component. So this is maybe also quite interesting. So actually, like last month, a month ago, Facebook published a first draft of React VR, which is also based on React Native, interestingly. So you can also take React Native to render in 3D. So this is actually a 3D website I can show to you. Let's see if I can get out of here. So this is a website. You can just look around. You can press, for example, here, and there you get the React Native view rendered. And you can press the button here and change, for example, now I want to change to manual gear, or I want to change the color of the seats, React Native. So if it's more than a toy, that's up to you or up to the future, but it presents somehow visually what the potential of this technology is if you're no longer constrained to HTML, because this is rendering in WebGL with 3GS. So this is the stack actually. So it's React VR building on React. It's building on 3GS and React VR, and they're also developing a VR browser. I think this will be a few years until it gets to the mainstream, but this is something to watch for. Okay, so, and actually I've got one of these at home. So if you're interested, this will be the third workshop. Just play around with React VR, and here you see the code. It's almost identical. It's React Native code. The only thing that is new here is this panel component, which actually presents some background image that shows, for example, the horizon for the distant object. This is also something where you should already know React, but as said, you can join and have fun with us. All right, so far from my side. So thanks for coming again, and thanks Nacho for giving us a talk. Something that you might have seen already in the React Meetup, but for those that haven't seen a React Native app before, I think it's a nice example. This is the Bion 2 app now in the App Store, and this is completely done in React Native. And you can see it looks native. You see nice animations. This is a React Native app. You can also launch, of course, the audio, but just for you to see for those that haven't seen a React Native app before, it doesn't look so different from native apps.
So let's start. It will be an introduction to Redux. So then it will be more advanced topics. But here we'll introduce the fundamentals of Redux. Redux is a concept that has not a huge API. You don't have to memorize many calls, but it's something that it's a concept that is good you need some time to digest it, like React itself. React and Redux, they are both concepts that you need some time to, so it's natural for you to work it this way. Okay? So, well, my name is Nacho Martin. Nacho is an actual name. It's particularly my name. I work at a company called Immutables, and well, we do projects, tailor-made projects. So it's important for us to choose one stack that we are comfortable with, and we have been using React for 1.5 years now, and React Native during the last year we published 4 applications. Well, you can say 2 because there are 2 Android versions and 2 iOS versions of the 2 applications. And yeah, we are really happy with this technology. And also we use Redux. Redux is a very nice tool when your project grows. So, but then, that's not working. So, yeah, what is Redux? I think it's important when you use libraries, to know who is the author and some history of the library. Well, it's a state container. If you use React, you see that in documentation there is no mention of things like models or model manager or things like that. it's more oriented to the presentation, to the view, to the rendering, to be performing in the view. And then they say, okay, you have a state. If you change the state, then it will be React will call your render function, and it will be efficient. So, but they are not talking much about the state. The state is something that you can manage with React, but at some point you may need an external library for working with the state in an efficient way. And there are some libraries, and Redux is the most popular. I think it's the most popular. Well, I think by far. It's created by this guy, Dan Abramov. He is working in Facebook. I think this is important because, well, has some authority, and also in terms of maintenance of the library, I think it's important. It's inspired by Flux and also by Elm. Elm is, by the way, a very nice language. If you are into functional languages, Elm and React and Redux share some ideas. So there is some information. You see some ideas going back and forth from this language and Redux and React. So maybe if you like React, for instance, maybe it's something that you may like. And it's a library that can be used without React. So of course, without React Native, you can use it alone. But I think the most common use is with React. In fact, if you see many tutorials or many libraries in React, they say if you are using Redux, or you are, in the case of Redux, there is always a comment, or if you are using React, that is like the normal. They are quite complementary. They are a nice complement. Okay, but what problem does Redux solve? Maybe you have used React and you feel that you don't need anything else, like that your project is complete and you don't need anything. Like, why should you add just another dependency to NPM? That's something that we always say. Should I add more stuff there one day? Well, the thing is that when applications grow, you might find this kind of situation. Okay, let's see that we have this simple application that is a counter with just two buttons to make it simple: increment and decrement. And you can just press increment, 1, then 2, 3, then you press decrement, it's 2, so it's very simple. And you normally code this in React with a local state. This will be a typical case of a component that has a local state. What does this mean? That these buttons will have, we'll call functions that will say set state, so the current counter +1, set state, the current counter -1, and then render will be called, and the changes will be reflected. And this state will be, the important thing is that the state will be part of this component. Okay, but what happens if at some point someone says we need to do something like this? Now we have a different component that maybe is in the same view, or maybe is in another part of your application. Maybe there is a router at some point, but these two counters are connected, and the buttons, if you press increment, it has an effect to the other one. So now the state cannot live in either of the components, but should live in a common parent. Normally you look for the first common parent to put the state, okay, and then propagate the state to its children, and then children propagate to the children, and then someone, maybe some child will use this state and have a use for it. So this is the first approach you use, and it's in the tutorials of React. But then you tend to have intermediate components that only receive props, and pass them to their children without using them. So you tend to have components passing things that are not related to them. Okay, so it will be something like this. In another example, you have this John in different components, and you have a hierarchy. So you have a tree of components. Then this John with this name normally will live in this common parent, the first common parent they have, in this case, the root. And then it will just pass props with the state itself, and then also callbacks to change the state. But in this case, for instance, these intermediate components just receive data that they don't need. They just pass them around. And that makes our application more difficult to understand with the time. Because, for instance, here, if we remove at some point this hi John, then it's very likely that its parent will still receive the name that doesn't need anymore. And it's difficult that someone reads the file and say, okay, I know that there is no child using this data, so I remove from me, from this place. And also if you remove here, hi John, then now the common parent should be a bit more on the right. So you should change where the state lives to be more clear. But it's not so, with only one property it's okay, but when you have more, it's difficult to know what's your tree doing, how it's your tree. It's like more a cauliflower. So this approach has the problem that it's messy, and at the end it's difficult to understand the flow of data. It's difficult to understand what some components are doing. And if you don't understand your code, then, well, bad things happen because you have people say, no, I don't touch this because I don't know what it's doing. That's very bad. Then maybe you say, okay, but React is a very nice library. I should provide a solution for this. And then you carefully read the documentation, and you find something called context that is in the documents. And you see there, context is a way to pass data down the tree, but without doing it manually in every component. So you just say, I have this data, and then maybe someone in the tree needs it. So they can just say, I need it, so they get it. And that looks like the perfect solution, but there's only one problem, that if you are in that page of the documentation, the first thing you see is that it's experimental, and you shouldn't rely on it, because it can change at any moment. And if you have been like for 1-2 years relying on this for something like managing the state of your application, and it changes, then, well, you have a bad month or bad time, at least. So you shouldn't use context API. Then, now here, maybe if someone has used Redux or has even read about how Redux works, will say this is a trap because I know that Redux uses context, and you are saying that you shouldn't use context, but you should use Redux that uses context. So what's this paradox? How you resolve this paradox? It's a trap. Well, the thing is that it's much better to use a library that uses an unstable component than use it directly. So that's what people in Facebook, in fact, has been created in Facebook, say. If at some point context changes, well, the author of Redux will know very quickly, and then he will change his library. But you won't see the change. You are using Redux API, not context API, so you wouldn't notice the change. You only have to increment the versions, so it's much better. Then this is what Redux is trying to do. Then how does it work? Like, what's the main idea? So how do they solve it? Well, imagine, this is the full code of this component. It's very typical component of React. In case you are not super familiarized with React, let's see, you have a render function that will render it's a representation of the state. It will receive the state and some properties from its parent. In this case, there are no properties. And based on this state and these properties, will produce a representation of the component. In this case, 2 buttons and 1 counter. And then the buttons have callbacks to call this increment and decrement. And what these functions do is to have a state that is, you see, this state is local to the component, and produce a next version of the state. So you have state, and then you produce a next, like a frame, an animation, for instance, a next step. I want you to focus on this increment and decrement. Let's change this a bit, because it will allow us to introduce Redux. So we have this, the same. And then people thinking in Elm, Flags, Redux, they have thought about this quite a bit, and they said, okay, this looks like it's a simple operation, but we can split it into parts if we want. I mean, looks like something atomic, but we can still split it. So you may want to do this with your component and saying, what if instead of changing the state directly, we call a function we call this function dispatch, and we pass a description of the event, what we call an action. So we say, this is the action that has been produced. It can be increment or button click or something like that, a description of what has happened. And then there is a function that will say, that will be in charge of changing the state. It will call another function and will say, there is this action that has been produced, and you have this current state. You are responsible for giving me the next the next version of the state. And this is called reducer. So we put this reducer in the code. And then this is doing exactly the same, more verbose, more code. Maybe some colleagues will complain, they say this is the same but more confusing. But it's halfway to what Redux does, okay? Because you see how the reducer is just taking actions and the state, and depending on the action, changing the state. So it's quite simple. It's just a function. Well, what if this reducer, instead of being something attached to only one component, was something that was global or living in some root of the tree? So it was accessible by the whole application. And what if this state was not local, but was some kind of global state, or at least a root state? That is what Redux does. So this is pretty much like what Redux does, but Redux takes this and puts it in globally and allows you to connect to a global state. So this is easy to see in a picture. So what we will do is to create an action, dispatch it, and then from the current state and the action, we produce a next version of the state. So we are going to produce new versions of the state. This has very nice properties as well, because then you can, for instance, do things like what if we can time travel, things like that, because you know all the animations. You can also reproduce on a state, things like that. It's very powerful. But just remember, for now, we can create an action, dispatch it, and then a reducer takes the action and the state and produces a new version of the state, and it will be represented in the component. Okay. Well, now is the moment. For this moment, we didn't need Redux, but now is the moment. As I said, Redux is not particular of React, so you need to use it with React. You need Redux and like some bridge or some utilities, React Redux, but it's only a matter of writing Redux and React Redux, but you can use it like as a whole if you are using it in React. Then the important concepts are actions, that are just JavaScript objects that describe something that can happen in your application. At some point, you have a list of things that can happen in your application. They can be something very simple like this. They always have to have a type. This is the only thing that it's the only field that you need for sure. Or they can be more complex, like maybe you have a to-do application and then you say there is a to-do, add it, and it has some text and a deadline. So it's good to keep it simple, not to make 50 properties in this case. It should be simple or small. Then reducers are just simple functions. You can write in whatever way you fancy, but the most common way is to write a switch, and then depending on the type, you produce a new state. Now, if you see, this is just a function that's taking two inputs, state and an action, and producing a new state. So this is a good place where you have to do more complex computations to determine the next state, and you can nicely extract this into functions, and then unit test them. They are functions that are really pretty to unit test, because you only have state, action, and to produce a new state, and then you have all the possible combinations of state and new state tested and quite deterministic. It's very nice to have. But this is it. We have still not imported anything from Redux, but now we will do to connect these pieces together. So when you have your application, you wrap it into a component called provider. This provider, and you provide to it, you give to it a store. And what is a store? A store you create it with the function create store, and it's a kind of state with a reducer in it. So say what reducer should I call when I receive an action? So when Redux receives an action, it will call this reducer, the reducer that we saw in the last slide, counter reducer. So, and with this, Redux knows everything about how to create new versions of the state. But then, how can we connect this store, this state, this global state, or root state to our components? Then there is another piece that you have to import. This is called connect. This connect function allows us to produce connected components. So here, the first part, you have a component that is not connected, and then, but what you do is to create a connected version. So you enhance this component. What it means that connect has 3 possible parameters, but the most important is this first one, is map state to props. It's a mapping of the global state, the whole state of application, to properties that will, props that will be received by this component. So in this case, for instance, we say that counter will be state counter, but you can do here more complex things, but this is very, very typical to say, I use this slice of the state. And then it will be present in your component. It will be passed as props. And also, you will have this other function, pass as props, that will allow us to dispatch new actions. So with this, the circle is complete. We have connect that receives states from the reducer, and we can dispatch actions. So again, graphically, create an action, dispatch the action, and create a new version of the state in the reducer. So the store is kind of glue. And this is pretty much what Redux does. So it's the core is this. We can see now this application. So, this thing here. Moment, because I know this. Some. I think this is a bit too big. So this is compiling the JavaScript code, whatever, and that's it. It was as expected, so duplicate, decrement, so on. Then let's see the code. You have already seen it, but this is, well, you know that you normally have an iOS entry point and an Android entry point, but they are just simply calling to a common application in this case. There are no differences for this application, this simple application. This is the root, like the main component, and you have this provider here. Okay, this provider here that is using the store that we have created by using a reducer. Reducer is here, so it's just a function, nothing imported, anything, very clean, just actions, descriptions of the action, of the new state based on the action, and then the components are just counter is so this is the component that is well, this is invisible, so this part is just a component that doesn't know much about connecting things, or doesn't know that it's connected, except for the dispatch that we will see later, who can even decouple even a bit more. But then using this map state to props, we can just inject this state counter and this dispatch. And the other component is even simpler because it's the same thing with just one button and calling duplicate instead of the other. So with this, we have like the fundamental thing of Redux. And as you see, we don't need a lot of code to do this. It's pretty much what we had with a bit more. So no, we don't need to create thousands of files or whatever. But we'll see that sometimes it's interesting to have more, to enhance this with other things. Because when this grows, every application grows in a different way. And you will find different problems in this case. And there are parts that may require your attention. So there are parts that can be improved. So there are libraries that can further help you, or techniques that can further help you if your application grows, depending on the way it grows. But as well as it's a good practice to not use Redux the first day. Like, I think it's better to use React and then learn React without Redux and then apply Redux, so you know you will know what is Redux exactly doing. You don't give it for granted that you see how Redux cleans your code. That if you use from the first day, it will be something like you just give for granted, or you think that it's like totally connected, React or Redux. I think it's better to not use at the beginning all the libraries you find, and use them, but be aware that they exist. So when you find the case that you need them, apply them. So we will give a review of things that can be useful. Some things are optional, some things are mandatory. Like the first one is mandatory. This is an advice, but when you start, you tend to think where to put the code, and there is a temptation of put things in the reducer that don't belong to the reducer. Reducers are always pure functions, so this means that are deterministics. Same input is always the same result, and they don't have side effects. So there are no calls to APIs, no calls to, I don't know, they don't send emails, they don't do anything. Like only input, output. And very nice to test. Then, one thing that you might find is that, as we said, a reducer tends to be a switch. And if you have like 100 actions, then the switch is huge and it starts to be difficult to maintain. And then also you will see that you have different parts in your application. So for instance, maybe we have now a counter, but then we have a to-do application, or you tend to have a part of the state that is dealing with tokens and authentication and things like that, and it becomes messy to have the end is messy to have a switch that is dealing with a counter and also with tokens of security. So it's better to have separate reducers. So you can think of your state as a tree, and then different reducers can deal with different branches. And they are combined by this function, combined reducers. You can do this like in a tree, not only two, but as much as you need. Okay? This is quite useful. Then also there is one thing that is a question that at the beginning you may have, is about which data to store. Because there is sometimes the thing that, like here, for instance, it's a simple case of a to-do list, but you may want to store, you say, okay, I have to present sometimes the to-do, the full to-do list, and then only the completed items of the to-do list, and maybe there are a lot of them. Should I store 2 or 3 separate copies of this data, the complete version, the filter version, the filter version with completed, the remaining that are not completed? What should I do? Or these kind of things, or you need a counter of the number of to-dos. Should I store this number here? It's better to normalize the store, so the state, the global state, and just have one source of information, one source of truth, and then you kind of build projections of this, or build the derivations of this data for the components. This logic sometimes goes in the components, so people put this in components, but it's much better to use selectors. In this function, make state to props, we provided before a simple counter is counter, but in some cases, for instance, in this case, you can use a selector. So the component gets the right version of the to-dos, maybe filtered by completed or incompleted. And in some cases, you may find as well that this function is time-consuming to prepare. Like you have a lot of data, and then you have to do a lot of computations here. And how can you optimize this? There is a library called reselect that it's quite helpful for this, because it's memoized. We call it memoized is that it will store the result, and it will only change it when visibility filter or the state of to-dos and the state visibility filter change. Not other changes will not produce a new result. So it will be something that the library does. So this can be something that at the beginning you can scratch your head a bit, but then it's better to do this in this place. Then another thing that you will see in the tutorials is that people use constants for action types. So instead of strings, constants. And you will see tutorials that have like this const increment counter equals increment counter, and then 100 of these things, and it's quite like, why should I do this? It's very annoying to have all this boilerplate. I didn't do this for the tutorial, but it's something that even you don't need it for a small application, but when it grows, it's better because of 2 reasons. One is that if you make a mistake writing increment counter in a string, then the switch that we are writing, it will just go to the default state, and it's difficult for you to notice that this action is not firing. If you are using constants, then it will Redux will know. Like, will say this is undefined. What's going on here? It's undefined. And then also it's interesting to have a file, these action types, with all the definitions, because then you know which actions can happen in your application. Which actions do you have? So people know, okay, we are not using this anymore. You can remove it. You can have a list of what is going on. It's important to have the state under control. Then there is another thing that at the beginning looks like more boilerplate, but is also useful, is to have action creators. Instead of firing an action like type increment, like this object, you fire a function that returns, you dispatch the result of a function. So you say, I dispatch increment, I dispatch add to do. It can be something simple or can have arguments. It's called action creators. This is useful by itself, and in some cases it's even compulsory. In some cases of middlewares, and some, it's a good practice. And then it's also a good combination with this other practice. That is, this second argument of connect. We said that it admits 3 arguments. We won't see the third. I never use the third, but I don't think it's super useful. The first one is super useful. The second one is useful sometimes for this. Apart from mapping the state to props, that is something you need always, you can map dispatch to props. So instead of injecting dispatch, you inject an action creator. So in this case, now the component has a button that doesn't use dispatch. It's using a callback that has been provided on increment click. So now it's totally unrelated to Redux. It doesn't know anything about Redux. Can be used with Redux or without Redux, because you only need to pass a callback that can be a dispatch or not. So maybe cleaner or more better for usability. Then there is also, this is very optional, but I really like this. So when you think about how to organize your code, normally what you do is to have a folder or directory for actions, action creator, and then another for reducers. But at the beginning it's confusing. And if your application is not super big, it's a bit, if you, at the beginning at least, you have several files, because you say, what's going on? You have 5 files. I see the action going here, then the reducer is here, then I have a store creator that is in another file, and can be confusing. And this is this proposal by a guy that is Eric Grass, that is very good programmer. What he proposes is to have files that have the action types, the reducers that are related to these actions, that are taking care of these actions, and action creators. So in just one file, you have all the things that are belong to this part. Again, this is good if you have this kind of tiny or small widgets or small parts. There is only one downside with this, you have to know if you want to use it, is that Redux reducers are not tied one-to-one to actions. So theoretically, you can do, or you can do an action that will fire changes in will capture by 2 reducers or 3 reducers. So if you are doing this sort of thing, this is more confusing, because this expresses like a binding between actions and reducers. But 90% of, in many cases, this is true. But in some cases, you may not need this. It's not like a religion. You may use different ways of organizing your code. So this is why, although this is popular, the creator of Redux says he doesn't necessarily endorse Redux, Dax, because it's Dax, it's a pan for Redux, Dax. Yeah. It's fine, but can confuse beginners, because you need to know that it's not one-to-one mapping. But yeah, knowing this, I think it's safe. And then one of the things that is very nice from Redux is the awesome dev tools that has. That only because we have this property that we are producing slices of the state, and you can rewind, and we can do whatever we want with the state, then we can have this tool. It's sometimes some tools are difficult to start using them, so it's like I'm lazy, I don't want to start using them because I know I have to install stuff. But in this case, it's very simple. You just have to include it as a dependency, and then you just import it. And when you create a store, creating a store admits enhancers. I think in the second part we'll talk about enhancers, and this is one of the enhancers that you can have. This is and this can be shown very quickly here. The application we had, and with this, it's almost over. So instead of creating the store this way, we create the store this with this argument, and then yeah, we have to reload. And I have here a Chrome. There's a Chrome extension, and you can have Redux DevTools, open remove DevTools, and with this and this, hope it works. Not working. Why not? It's a typical thing that.
I think you need to select the instance.
No, but I was trying several times before, but select the instance more, no? Maybe because I have opened several times today.
Don't worry, I can show it as well.
Okay, yeah.
Just click F12 on this browser.
Click at what?
F12.
As filed? What?
Open
The what? So I have this. Open remote, yeah. DevTools. Well, I don't know.
Don't worry.
Okay. I tried several times today, but yeah. I don't know. Well, what you see normally is, well, you see every time, is this. You have the actions filed, and you can do many things. You can see differences of a state, or you can even skip, you can rewind, you can export the state. Maybe you find a bug, so you say, okay, I want to export. Maybe, for instance, if you are doing a game, sometimes I do games for myself, and it's very annoying to write a game, because if you don't have these kind of things, if you find a bug, then you have to say, how can I reproduce this bug? Oh, you have to kill the monster, and then it's like in then 2 hours, then you find the bug, maybe not, and you try, oh, the bug is there, but let's reload, and then you just, it's terrible. With this kind of, saving a state or saving the game, it's much better. You have play, we have a lot of stuff. It's a pity that, well, anyways. And I think with this, it's only, I have to say thanks, and so, well, thanks to, of course, Thomas and the venue, and thanks to all of you. If you have questions or, just tell me.
All right, so I'll just briefly present how Redux would look like in a real application. So Thomas Kohler was actually so nice to add it to the React Natives app, and also Philip did the first thing, but he did it again. So essentially, what you can see here is an example where you see all the meetups, and here you can, it's a very primitive UI, let's say, but just to show the case, you can filter now. I only see the Cologne meetups, or I only see the Munich meetups, or I just see no meetups. And let's reload this. All right, so let's have a look at the code. So just for the people who haven't seen Redux before, and how it looks in React Native. So it all starts like we've seen with a provider. So you import React Redux, and you import from Redux. So Redux is, so here you create the store. The store is this big JSON object, and the functions, the reducers that manipulate the store. And combine reducers is just a function that just wraps all the functions, the separate functions, into one. So this is kind of the root of the functions that manipulate your store. And then here you call create store, and you pass the reducer functions there. In the initial state, in this case, it's just nothing. And then you have a React component. In this case, it's the app component. That means everything that's rendered is in the app component. So in this case, it would be just everything here, right? And here on the top level of the DOM, so to say, you wrap everything in a provider component, and this injects the store in the context of your components, like you've just heard. So this is just a quick review to refresh, and if you haven't heard it before, to just digest it in a real case. And actually now what we have are the actions So this is the toggle visibility. So it says, do I see Munich? Do I see Cologne? This is the action creator function where you can say, okay, I want to select which group, and then it selects or deselects if Munich or Cologne, for example, is shown. And this, of course, has to go somewhere. It's just a JSON object that's created in this function and being returned. This will then go to the reducer. In this case, the control reducer. This takes care of all actions that are of type toggle visibility. And then it checks, okay, the next state. So I have the current state here. And here I'm just making a copy of the state to the next state. And here I'm actually manipulating the next state, not the current state. And so I manipulate the copy. We shouldn't manipulate the original state. So we still can go back. This is one of the ideas of Redux, that you can rewind. It's following up on the game example. In the game, sometimes you have something like you've done it to this part and then you fall down, and then you can go back to the previous state where you just left off. This is kind of what the initial idea of Redux was, that you can rewind all your application states and see where your application actually fell into the bug.
So could you explain what is 3 dots in JavaScript now?
Sorry?
2 lines above the 3 dots and
This here, this is the ES6 spread operator. So it takes this object called state, and in this state object, this is, for example, this object here. It doesn't provide what's in the object as a single object, but it just splits it apart. So every attribute in this object is being passed separately. And this is just a shorthand to just split the object apart and put it together in a new object. All right, so yeah, essentially this is like for the visibility, as we've seen, the action creator, and this is the reducer that actually manipulates the state. And then there's the question, how does the list know about these changes? So what we see here, this is the list, the white area that you see here. And on the bottom, you see these switches, these green things. And they actually control now calling these action functions that are being defined on the bottom. So here, let's move this a bit to the side. So this is the original pure React list component or list view component that's just the list screen here. And here we're injecting the part of the Redux state that's interesting to this component. And here we're connecting the actions that are actually being triggered from this page. So when you switch here, the actions that are being passed here are called. So this is everything that's in here. I hope this helped a bit to just see it from a slightly different perspective. And so who hasn't understood Redux in the first try, maybe you need a second or a third try. That's just normal. It's just a strange concept to start with. It's a bit different to what we've seen before. Yeah, so this is my part, and essentially if you want to work on Redux, just try around with it, come to the next coding night, and we'll just add, for example, the knowledge base and the Redux actions to create new news items or knowledge items. So thanks.
Okay, let's start. So, my name is Thomas. I'm an engineer at Singapore GmbH and no limited company, but some might know our product, which is Pilgermietwagen.de and Camperdays.de. It's part of the 7 travel cluster of Pro7, which you might know because it's not in the neighborhood. You can reach me via email on that address. You can also reach me on GitHub on that nickname, and also in our Slack channel under Chirapsushi. I started to work with Redux in June 2015, and that was the first day I came into contact with React, and it was also the first day I fell in love with React. So this talk will be about Redux, would you like to know more, and let's head to the overview. I will begin with some trade-offs. So if you implement Redux, there are some trade-offs, but For those trade-offs, you will also get some benefits. I will have a brief description of what middlewares are and what they can do for you. We will have a live demo of a small app written in React, and it uses persistence layer and a web browser database and asynchronous syncing. And I will also have a short description on immutables, which will come in very handy if you use reducers. I wanted to talk about funcs, but while I was doing research on funcs and sagas, I figured out that there's a much better library out there, and the whole topic will be handling business logic within the reducers, which is a very big topic, and I intend to provide this topic as a special future talk. I can briefly describe what a func is and what it does, but there's no special talk on it today. So let's begin with the trade-off. So the first one is you need to describe all your application state as plain objects in MS. So who would use a web developer? So does this seem to be a huge trade-off for you? Exactly, because every time you create a session, you need to hydrate and dehydrate and deserialize all your state. The next trade-off is all your changes in the system must be plain object. As you have seen, all those action creators, they only can emit plain objects. You can't have something more fancy. Some consider this to be a trade-off, but it's not a big deal. So the third trade-off is, which can be a hurdle for web developers that are not used to functional programming, you need to create pure functions in your reducer. So every time you manage to create an impure function in your reducer, your state will update. So does everyone know the difference between pure and impure functions? Okay. So let's start with the benefits. So when you have a Redux powered application, you can have a persistence layer because you have a state which is a plain object, which can also be represented as a pure JSON string. So it's very easy to just store this JSON string within your storage. And there's a ready-made NPM package called Redux persist, and that's basically all the code you need to create it. Once you enhance your store with this persistence layer, all your state will be stored. It's possible to choose between several storage engines. If you're coming from React Native, you can use async storage. And if you're coming from the web, you should use local storage. So the default storage engine is local storage, which is decent, but the problem is local storage is a synchronous operation, and if you use local storage, you have facade for web SQL and index SQL, which is a little bit better because it's asynchronous. So sometimes customer calls and says, oh, I have a bug. And they say nothing is working. So you need to ask what happened. How can I reproduce this bug? So this is something that you can circumvent with Redux. Because each time your app crashes, you just need to serialize the user action that caused the crash, put it together with a snapshot of your state, and send it to your ticket system. So this way, you can inject this state and replay the action, and you don't need to ask the customer how to reproduce the bug. There's also a ready-made NPM package called Redux Bug Reporter, and don't worry, I will share the slides, and you will get the link to all those NPM packages, and it's very easy to include it. So when you have some web application that is running on the server and on the client side, sometimes you have some application where you're doing some big and heavy calculations on the server side, which are better to be done on the server, not on the client. And you can pre-populate a state and influence to your server. There's no special NPM package because that's part of Redux. So The link below is the link into the section of the Redux documentation where you find a way how to handle server-side rendering. So isomorphic apps are a go with Redux. You have your state in your plain objects, and all your actions are plain objects. So it's very easy to send your action over the wire to a server. And that's why you can create a collaborative environment. The moment you pass your action over the network, the server side can do the action for you. It's even more easy if you pass the complete state. So for instance, if it's on a big state, you just pass it completely somewhere else. And some features like Apple's continuity, like working on your iPhone and continuing work on your iPad when at home, will be done for you automatically. So I have prepared a small live demo afterwards where I use PouchDB and a Pouch Redux middleware. So PouchDB is a JavaScript implementation of Couch, which can be run in the browser and in React Native. And the Pouch Redux middleware will take care of syncing your PouchDB with your Redux state. So debugging is very easy because I will show you a demonstration right now. You can rewind all your states. So every time you publish or manage a state change within Redux, all your actions and all your state changes can be recorded by a special tool, and you can travel between all those states and see where your app crashed. It's the same tool that Nacho wanted to present you, and I will show you a version that's working with a web application. It's a lot easier to do a web application because if you want to debug a React Native application, you need to establish a connection between both, and sometimes it crashes. Also, undo and redo basically comes for free. All you need to do is just store the history of your states and re-inject into the store. So when was the last time your boss asked you for such a feature? It's a pain in the ass to do it with MySQL and Ajax. So before we go into the live demo, this is almost the same animation like that Nacho showed you, but there's a slight difference. We added the middleware over here. So what happens? Every time, so let's wait for the action. Every time your view emits, every time the view emits a new action, and it's an asynchronous action, the middleware will perform a special call to the API and handle the control state. So in the first instance, it will say, fetch something for me, and the middleware will instantaneously return the promise and say, oh, I will fetch something for you. And there's another state change made that will say the store, oh, something will be coming right now. And this is how funcs work. Every time you want to make an asynchronous request, you create it here. The promise will be sent to the reducer, and the reducer will say, Redux, please wait a little bit. And the moment the API responds, the middleware will also emit another action and tell the reducer, so here's the data, deal with it. So let's try the live demo. So this is one of my pet projects. At our company, we have, in every office, we have a huge TV monitor, and it acts like a kiosk. So we want to display all our monitoring services, our KPIs that we take care of, some mails, or even the calendar of our team meetings. And what it does, you can add some URLs to it, and as long as they are allowed to be displayed within an iframe, you should be safe. So, okay, this is the first one, and just add another one so that you can see how this app is working. So, I can go through the 3 sites. Yeah, take a little longer. No, decent connection. So, what this app does, it has 2 different URLs, which are shown for 30 seconds each. now let's try to find out what happened in Redux. So it seems a little bit more lucky than natural right now. As you can see, this is the init action, which is always invoked the first time. This action is the Redux persist package that I showed you just some seconds ago, because every time I enter a URL list, it will be stored on the local store within the index SQL. And here we can see the complete state of the application. We can have it displayed like this, or even as a chart. So basically, I have 3 reducers. The first one has a collection of all slides that are going to be displayed. This is a settings reducer which will store my preferences for the connection to a remote database. And the third reducer will take care of the sync state. So this is more or less a control state. Every time the application messes up with the connection to the remote database, the sync state will take care of passing the information to the application. So let's see what happens when we add another URL. Any suggestions? Google? Yeah, Google won't do because they do not allow me to display the within iframe. Okay, let's take BMW.
You have error handling as well. You have error handling as well. So if you type in Google, will it show the new state?
No,
But it could be, right?
it could be, but as only tech guys are using this tool, you know,
Yeah.
it's bug reporting. But again, you would see the state because Google would, I can show you. So Google would not
on GitHub or?
This is from GitHub, and you can have a look into it. And I'm also accept pull requests. And yes, it's not the best piece of work I did. This was my first pet project involving Redux, and I coded it, I think, in April last year. So it was my experiment project. So when I add the Google, nothing happens because I can add Google, but it won't be displayed because the item will say same origin policy is violated. So what we can see here right now is we just added action. I just invoked the insert slide action, and the slide is something that is part of the action. So the action type was insert slide, and this plain object gets passed to the reducer, and the reducer will add this one into this array. So what I can do now is I can jump, so this is the timetable thing Nacho was talking about. Okay, maybe not. It's not working right now.
Do you need to close your
Which one?
model?
The one under the settings.
Is it refreshed? Okay. At least I can skip a state and maybe. Okay, now it's working. Thanks. So by pressing jump, I re-inject the state of that state change. So I have the state, and I also have the action creator that will cause the state change, and that is what Nacho wanted to show you. And it's pretty cool because the more changes you make, the more complicated it gets. And even if you have a lot of reducers, and your apps will start with maybe 2, 3 or 4 producers, but of my company, we don't use Redux, but we use Flumux because it was way too early to use Redux by that time. And in Flumux you have stores, which are the equivalent of producers in Redux. And we have 15 stores handling all the states in our app. And our team, the product team, is right now working on delivering our main portal also on Redux. And I think they also have at least 20 users right now handling all the states. And then charts like these come very handy. So you do not lose your orientation of who can be there. So the next thing I can do is I will now add a local PouchDB instance. So you can see I just fired the edit settings action, and there's also a diff where you can see what happened. So I switched from enabled false to true, and from sync mode 1 to 3, and also from okay, you can see it here. So I switched from empty string to the current URL, and when I close, let's open the file. So on the right side I have the Chrome, on the left side I have the Safari. And now I'm going to show, at least I tried to show it, but sometimes it breaks. When I now add another URL, it should be updated on the left side, so it works right now. Shall I open the DevTools, or do you believe me that it's meant to be done via PouchDB and Couch? So what? Okay. So the PouchDB is gone right now. No, it's not. So the problem is the connection is not good enough, and sometimes when too many instances of PouchDBs, when too many instances of PouchDBs try to interact with one PouchDB, the synchronization messes up. And I think that's my problem right now, that I have a conflict. But this list will be stored within PouchDB, and this PouchDB will be filled with a middleware. So every time I add, I emit an action to add a slide, there's a special store enhancer listening on that action as well. And I do not have to implement by myself because it's implemented within the middleware. And every time the add slide action gets performed by a reducer, it will be passed through my reducer and through the reducer of the PouchDB middleware. And that's a nice way to have some things done magically. Even storing to the local storage is done by a middleware. So every time I add a slide, there's a state change, and the middleware of the Redux persist will react on all state changes. I can also configure Redux persist to have a whitelist and blacklist on reducers, so I do not need to store my complete state on the on disk, but I do not have to care how it's done, because the middleware will intercept all actions, and that's the nice thing about the Redux system. So every change will get through the dispatcher, and this dispatcher can be enhanced with store enhancers and reducer enhancers. and they both can react on your action changes, or even only on state changes. And that's how middlewares are working, and also the funcs. So any questions regarding the demo or middlewares? So let's head to the last slides. One thing I can really, and I can't endorse enough, is using immutables. Immutable data can't be changed once they are created. And this is very handy when you work with reducers, because if you mess up with the state in the reducer, there's no state change, and no state change will propagate it to your front end and to your views. Can everybody see it, or? So I think it's very self-explanatory. So the moment you create an immutable and you want to set another value, it's impossible. So it can't be changed, and that's why it's pure. So you're no longer required to do defensive copying like we did in the React Native app. So times of spreading your state are gone right now, if you want to use immutables. And yes, Redux is able to work with immutables. So you can describe your initial state and all the other states within immutables. You also have nice features like advanced data structures. You can have lists, stacks, maps, ordered maps. And to be honest, I used them, and that was enough for me. But feel free to dive into documentation and to try all the rest of them. They're highly recommended. And one of my colleagues, he's our chief evangelist for immutables, and every JavaScript project he approaches and he needs to make a merge request, he says, I won't approve until you use immutables. Also a nice feature is, that comes for free, is now it's easy to compare two different objects. So no more including of Lodash or some other deep equal comparators for your unit tests. This is very, very nice. So every time you want to see if you need to make a manual state change, just compare your objects. And this is also something that this Redux is doing under the hood for you. And this library is called immutable.js, and it's also available from Facebook, and they also endorse it to use it in every project you are using. So, and that's it for the advanced part. Any questions?
So you use immutable in your store directly, or you map JSON before returning?
You can use it directly. It's possible.
So
there's an extension called Redux Immutable, and then Redux is completely aware of immutable.js, and you can use your immutable directly. You don't need to convert it with the to JSON method or to JavaScript method.
So Redux immutable. And then from actions you return also immutable, so you convert them to immutables in Redux.
It's like you want to what? If you use immutables to create your state, I recommend to use immutables in your actions as well.
Yeah.
But you're free to do what you want. You don't need to use it. Sometimes it seems to be a little bit of overhead for just passing a string to use an immutable, but you can do it.
Yeah. Okay.
The middleware, how does it update from one browser to the other?
With the PouchDB, in my example,
Yeah.
I can dive into the code, but maybe it's not too easy to understand. Let me see. Okay. So here I registered the Pouch middleware, and I have to create a mapping for the move into an update action. So every time these actions are called, the middleware will also trigger. And that is the magic behind it. So if you fire a delete slide, an insert slide, or update slide, not only your local store will update it, but also the PouchDB store. And if you want to send it from one browser to another, that's another ballgame. It's, I must admit, a little bit messy. Where's it starting?
Enabled true. It's enabled true.
Yeah, no, this is only for the settings. Yes, here. Here I do create a new PouchDB, which will be a global variable, or more or less global. And here's the complete configuration of it. So I need to put in my URL. Skip setup is also very nice because sometimes you have a lot of conflicts if you don't skip it. You can also pass a user and a password. But since it's only via HTTP in my local machine, I don't care for it. If you're doing it in the web, you should do it with HTTPS. And remote DB.
There it is.
Yes. So when I want to make a read write link, I just have to say to my database instance, just sync it with a remote database. And PouchDB will do it magically for you, so you don't need to make a connection. And what they do on the hood, they just fire a lot of HTTP requests because PouchDB is RESTful, and you can also listen. You can also see it within the browser. One moment.
You are like subscribing to an event dispatcher.
Yes. So your local PouchDB, I don't know if they describe, but I think no. The PouchDB will call the PouchDB all the time. There's no subscription. It's not pushing. But they do it in a very short time. I think all 5 seconds the PouchDB will make a request to the PouchDB and check only for changes. And when there's a change, the change will be sent to all the local instances. So Couch and Pouch are NoSQL databases. They are not very good, but they do one thing really perfect, and that is syncing across everywhere. So you have one central instance, you can have several central instances, and they all try to make to give you the latest version. Sometimes you run into conflicts and need to solve them, but it's like working on different bunches to get. You always need to resolve some conflicts.
Maybe a more specific question to immutables. Can you do prop type checking with immutable objects? Because I guess you would pass it to the component, the immutable object, but now it's not a JavaScript object anymore. So
in the component.
Yeah, that's the question. Because like it's good for should component update because you can just check objects, but can you still validate if the?
I don't know for sure.
Okay.
I can check and even notice. Or also include the slides.
Yeah.
I know for sure. Yes?
You skipped the Redux fund because you said there is some more amazing library. Can you tell me the name there?
It's Redux Logic.
Redux Logic?
Yes. Okay. Functions are very simple. So every time you create a fund, it can perform an asynchronous function for you. The problem with the functions is you can't stop them. Once you trigger the request, you're not in control of aborting it. And you do not know when it's ready. And stuff like bouncing and throttling is not possible. Functions are great, and all beginners with Redux will come across them very, very soon, because everyone in the Redux community and ecosystem will suggest you to try it out. But the moment you come to a level where you need a little bit more out of the functions, you will switch to sagas, which are totally different and are much more complicated. And then some clever guy came up with with Redux Logic, and there you have all the things like canceling your requests, throttling them, or debouncing them. But to really understand all those things, I need to be more time to prepare. And it's even for me, Redux logic is very new, and I haven't understood it good enough to tell someone else about it.
How about in comparison with Redux Saga?
Which one?
Redux Saga compared to Redux Logic?
Redux logic seems a lot easier than Sagas. Because for Sagas you need to think different how to design your asynchronous request. And coming from the web development, you're not used to functional programming, or at least most developers are not so used to functional programming, and not to a level you need to understand Sagas. And Redux logic it seems to be a lot easier to understand than Sagas, and maybe I will prepare a talk on how to handle business logic in your reducers and in React apps, because this is where you come to the point to use functions or Sagas or Redux logic. But I just recently came across this library, and as I said before, I need to understand it a little bit more and to exercise with it, and then I will prepare a talk for it. Yes?
Where would you draw the line between Redux Logic and Relay? When to use which one?
Therefore, I need to know what Relay is really doing. Yeah. So I haven't dived into Relay or GraphQL right now. So anybody else knows the difference? Or?
He knows a lot about Relay.
Relay does some more. And it also has a store inside, it's the resting part. But it also ensures that all the caching is done in the client properly. Yeah, actually, just works with a GraphQL server on the other side. And some more. So,
Thanks. So thanks to the speakers for their great talks, great introduction, and great advanced talk about Redux. And I think what you've seen is that Redux in React Native is almost exactly the same, like using it in React. And this is great because if you're developing a web application, you then have to replicate your business logic for your app, and if you're using React Native. So this is great. And of course, business logic is a topic like which middleware are you using Redux, are you using Relay. There's also Apollo client, if you are familiar with Meteor, which has some kind of nice syncing, like you're not pulling, but you're actually subscribing and pushing changes. So what's recently coming out is the Apollo client, which integrates with Redux, so you don't have to choose Redux or Apollo, but you could choose Redux and Apollo, and actually have a GraphQL server, if you know what it is. Your client subscribe to this GraphQL server. If you have any changes on the remote side, you immediately see them on the client side. So GraphQL essentially is just a way of subscribing, so to say, to data from your server. You say, this is the JSON objects I need, and the GraphQL client and server will decide how to get and when to get this data. Apollo client is also doing the caching. If you request data that is already being cached on your client, then it is not fetched again. So this is about React Native and Redux, about business logic, Relay, Redux. You have it. And one more thing is about the coding nights. You've seen a couple of proposals, let's say, for the coding nights. Who is interested in one of them? Like, who would like to have one of these coding nights? So not too many. What's most interesting for you? Which one of these? Are you interested in learning about Redux, about React VR, or are you interested in something else like GraphQL, Apollo client, or the topics I presented? Who's interested in Redux? So, yeah, so I think about these coding nights,
the problem there is if we are just a few and these are mostly beginners, it's not really working well. So I will see if this is sufficient for actually making these. So if you really want to have this happen, then let me know, because otherwise I will just prepare and it's a lot of work, and if there are not many participants, I won't do it. So, but I think what's actually working are these meetups where we present some topics. And so what I would actually then probably do is I will just work on this project with a few interested people and then present to you in the code examples like I've done today in the app, how you, for example, use Redux in your app, how you use GraphQL, stuff like this. I think this makes more sense then. All right, so thanks for coming, and yeah, thanks for showing up, thanks for the speakers, and to PlayStab for the venue and the food, and have a good night.